Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order, and welcome to Panwo TV. This is the fourth video in my series, the Shill Squad, and this is going to be an update to the Tribunal. Now, if you've not already done so, I strongly recommend you go to the link in the description box, where there is actually a link to the video Shill Squad 3 Tribunal, which is kind of like a background to this one, really, because I came up with the idea of this Shill Tribunal as a way of sorting out various issues to do with infighting, which, let's face it, in the truth movement is getting to be such a problem. It's hampering everything else. It's a problem that needs to be solved. It has to be solved, otherwise everything's just going to grind to a halt. So the idea of I came up with this idea of a tribunal to sort it out, and all the details are there. Now, since then, I've done a little bit more work on what I believe could be organisational plans, a model for how the Shill Tribunal could function, the kind of personnel, the way they would interact and things like that. And that is what this video is about. I should point out, this is not the final design for the Shill Tribunal. This is an interim basic model, a thought experiment again that I have devised, which as a way that the Shill Tribunal might function. And the way the Shill Tribunal will function in the end will not be decided just by me. It'll be a cooperative effort, so other people can chime in with their ideas. And indeed, I encourage people, anyone watching this, if you have some ideas, please contact me, email me, bennyj74@gmx.co.uk. There's a link on the Panwo TV blog to that. Or just put your comments in the comments box. I welcome any kind of input on that. So this is just simply an idea. This I'm throwing out there to you. See what you think. But I have thought an awful lot about it, and hopefully in the future we can finalise some ideas that we all agree on. So, the Shill Tribunal, what will it be like? Well, I've drawn a diagram which you saw in the titles, and I'm just going to explain a little bit more about that now. This diagram is my model for the basic personnel structure of the Shill Tribunal, and you can see here I have labelled it here: judge, defendant, defendant's advocate, accuser, accuser's advocate, members of the jury, interaction between them using the net or other means, and witnesses. And we'll just go through each of these roles in turn. Now, the first role that we'll explore in detail is the judge. Now, the judge in the Shill Tribunal will be very different to a judge you will find in a normal court. And the reason is because the tribunal will have no judicial power. So, again, this takes us back to the Beth Din Jewish courts and the Qadi, the councils of Sharia in the Muslim community that I talk about in the previous film of this series, the Shill Squad 3 Tribunal. So the role of the judge is not to institute any kind of sentence as such. The role of the judge is to organise the hearing, ensure that good order is maintained at all times. So that would mean, so if it's just to make sure that everything runs smoothly, everything runs correctly according to the conditions that have been agreed voluntarily by the participants. The judge will have no power to deliver a sentence, as I explain. You can't put people in jail or anything like that. But the judge can deliver a personal sentence between themselves and the convict. So, for example, if the judge is a Facebook group admin, they can ban a convict from their group after the hearing. So that would be one example of that. Now, the prime duty, the closest you can get to a sentence in this case after the hearing, is that the judge's prime duty will be to announce the verdict of the Shill Tribunal and publish it as far and widely as possible, just to explain the proceedings. Everything will be written down. The judge's job is to make sure everything is recorded, everything is distributed, so that everyone can actually see exactly what happened, and so that the ruling can be dealt with. And that really is all that can be done in terms of enforcement, but really that's enough. Now we come to the defendant and the defendant's advocate. Now, the defendant is the person accused of an offence and who has been committed to the Shill Tribunal for hearing. The defendant's advocate is the person presenting the case for the defence. So it basically works the same way that a barrister does in a Crown Court. So, I mean, it could be that some defendants will want to defend themselves and won't need an advocate. That's fine, that's up to them. the defendant can play this role themselves, in which case their advocate can remain within the hearing as an informal supporter if the defendant wants this, or they can simply be within the hearing by themselves. But either whoever it is, the defendant and the defendant's advocate and/or will present their case. They'll also get their chance to cross-examine the accuser and the accused and/or the accuser's advocate in exactly the same way you see in a normal courtroom. The accuser is the person who is basically bringing the case against the defendant. The role of the accuser will be to submit their application to the judge, who will then investigate and set up a hearing. The accuser's advocate is the person presenting the case for the prosecution in the same way a criminal barrister does in a Crown Court. So they will, as I said earlier, they will, just exactly with the defendant, the accuser's advocate, or indeed the accuser themselves, will get the chance to cross-examine the defendant, the accuser, and all witnesses. Alternatively, the accuser can opt to play that role themselves, in which case, as with the defendant, the advocate can remain within the hearing as an informal supporter. Also, the accuser, additionally, will, when they're in their dialogue with the judge, and they will get the chance to explain why they think that this hearing is necessary, and if the judge disagrees, then there can be maybe an additional hearing to decide whether or not the accuser actually gets their way and has the hearing set up. Again, and then in a sense the judge then becomes becomes the subject or the focus of another hearing. So that's another thing that the accuser can do, and that's something I'll cover in a future film in this series, because that in itself is a separate subject, the hearing to decide whether or not to go ahead with a hearing, so to speak. But that's the role of the accuser and the accuser's advocate. My idea for this tribunal, that it should be based on a jury system, as you get in Crown Courts when there's a serious criminal offence being committed. Now, the jury are the people who decide on the verdict, just like in a normal courtroom. Now, I'm not sure at the moment how many people should be on the jury. It might vary from hearing to hearing, and as you can see here, I've just put like a vague oval shaped, elongated oval to represent the jury themselves. Again, we've got to decide also who the jury should be, and I think there should be some ground rules when it comes to the selection of the jury. Firstly, they should not be partners or relatives of the accuser or defendant. I also think they should not be on the friends list of the accuser or defendant. And that, I think, of course, it could get a bit difficult finding enough people, but you know what I mean. I also say they need to have a foundational knowledge of the special interest of the accuser and or defendant. For example, if the defendant or accuser is involved in ufology, the Bigfoot research community, vaccine dangers, etc., the jury should have some foundational knowledge of those issues. The job of the way they'll be selected is the judge will approach these people in a random manner and ask them to become jurors of the Shill Tribunal hearing. If they agree, then it will be necessary for the accuser and defendant and or their advocates to approve them as jurors. So just as with a normal court, jurors can be dismissed by the barristers or by the defendant or the accuser. So that will be, in this case, in the case of the criminal court, it will be the Crown. In the case of the Shill Tribunal, it will be more like a lawsuit, so it will be like the plaintiff. But jury selection is a complicated thing, and obviously we'll need to think some more through about it. If anyone has some ideas, incidentally, about this or any of the other issues I bring up in this film, please put them in the comments boxes or email me. I'm quite happy to make this a cooperative effort. Now, witnesses. A witness is basically anyone else that the accuser or the defendant's advocates or the accuser or defendant choose to call to the hearing to give testimony. If they think it will help their client's position. So that would be just basically if you know somebody who knows something and you want them to present this to the hearing, you just call them. You just say, could you come and give your testimony to the hearing on this issue? And I think it's very simple. It's exactly the same as in a normal court. Who the witnesses should be, why they're qualified. Again, this is something that can be sorted out between the advocates and the judge. Now finally, this symbol here, which ironically looks very much like a police badge, doesn't it? This represents the interaction involved in the hearing, and that is the most complicated and difficult issue as part of the Shill Tribunal, which maybe I'll go into now in some more detail. So that is a basic outline of how the Shill Tribunal functions, and of course there's always these courts always work in a certain way, and the kind of the role of the different personnel and officers of the court depends on what kind of court it is, and also other things. And so again, it may turn out, for practicality's sake, that what I've just suggested to you will be no good and we need to throw it out and come up with something else. In which case, that's fine, I'll make another video about that, hopefully with some input from others. That's what I want to do. Now, hearings. Now, supposing we arrange the design, we finalise the design of the court, of the court, the Shill Tribunal Court, and then we then go on forward to have maybe some test cases just to see how it works, or maybe even we could even devise some fake cases or some fictional ones just to test it and see how it works. Now, hearings. How would we hold hearings? When would we hear them? When would we have them? Where and how? This is an interesting question, isn't it? So, of course, we could meet in the real world, like other private tribunals do, like the Beth Din or the Cadi. They hire function rooms, or they even use somebody's house. We could meet up together in a certain place and do it in real time in the good old-fashioned way. But that would be difficult. It may well be impractical, because we may well be dealing with different people over a wide geographical area, possibly the entire world. And so meeting in a particular place, in meet space, as they say, would involve a huge amount of travel. It'll involve a huge amount of expense and time. So I'm all in favour of us simply doing this online. Doing it online via some kind of communication service, such as the former Google Hangouts or Skype or Zoom or any other like that. We could just we could simply do like we do everything else online. We do everything online these days, don't we? I believe I'm very much in favour. I'm very much a proponent of the idea of a public trial. That means this is something that should be live streamed openly online. Now, I know it's not always possible to live stream large, supposing you have 10 or 11 people, you may not be able to live stream them all at once, in which case I would like to see recordings made and the recordings distributed openly without editing. And this will be the responsibility of the judge to make sure that happens, to make sure that everything is recorded and everything is published correctly. So basically it's completely open, justice is transparent. That's what I'm talking about here. I'm all in favour, actually, of getting this whole thing up and running as quickly as possible, because we have an awful lot of cases that you might describe as pending trial. And as I've said in the previous instalment in Shill Squad 3, this is a necessity that has become almost too late. So everything that I've just suggested really ought to have been done a long time ago to sort out these various problems, these various conflicts which are hampering everything we do. So what cases would you describe as pending trial? Well, cases that I've discussed before in these videos and others. That is Darren Perks, Kevin Annett, Ben Fellows, Simon Parks, Miles Johnston, and of course myself. I would be happy to submit myself to my own idea of a Shill Tribunal. If I design it'd be ironic, wouldn't it? I design the whole thing, I set it up, and I do most of the work, and I become the first accused. Well, I'll be happy with that. I'll be perfectly willing to do that. In fact, I'd like now to describe what I think might be a good test case. This is something obviously I've gone into before, and people have been asking me about this an awful lot. And that is the case of Larry Warren, and this has recently come up again because of a recent episode of Rich Planet TV. Now, this was actually released on Christmas Day. I remember Richard put it up on Christmas Day. I'm not sure why he chose to do that. Maybe it's because it happens to be the anniversary. It's actually the 39th anniversary of the subject matter of this particular video, but he chose Christmas Day, and I didn't actually see it when it was first uploaded because a lot of people were of course were out carousing with their family, and I was no exception. So I didn't actually realise that this was actually online until Boxing Day. So I first heard about it because people were inboxing me saying, "Hey Ben, you should see what Richard D. Hall has just done, the video he's just done. Check it out, check it out. It's all about Larry and stuff like that, and Rendlesham." And I thought, right. And I watched it. It's programme 279 of Rich Planet TV. At the time of recording, there's been one other since. And it's called Rendlesham UFO, 40 Years of Lies. That says it all, doesn't it? And amazingly, I've actually got my Rich Planet TV hat on today, and I think that's quite appropriate, isn't it? Yeah. So what Richard has done is he has decided to try and clear up some of the controversy in the RFI and get to the truth. Well, good luck to that. Good luck, mate. I mean, that's a tough job. Now, in order to do this, he has his methods have been somewhat restrictive, shall we say? And I'll come into that in a minute. I'll come onto that a little bit more later. But he's brought back in Peter Hyatt. Now, you'll know Peter Hyatt if you watch Rich Planet regularly, because he's a frequent collaborator of Richard's. Richard has brought in Peter Hyatt to analyse the language of people that he is suspicious of doing something or being involved in something. Peter Hyatt is a forensic psychologist, and he believes that he can actually work out whether people are lying or not based on the way they speak or the way they write. And this particular Rich Planet TV, Peter Hyatt comes in and he analyses the RFI witnesses. Now, he's been on before. Do you remember? He's been on talking about the Madeleine McCann case. Kate and Jerry McCann being interviewed. Hyatt has actually done an analysis on their statements. Also, Neil Armstrong. He's done an analysis on Neil Armstrong, who was the first man on the moon, supposedly. So Richard sets Peter Hyatt loose on testimony of 4 people. The 4 people within the RFI community, including 3 witnesses. I think he's chosen as older recordings as he can, because this is a much more difficult case, because unlike Neil Armstrong, for example, the RFI witnesses have spoken to the media extensively. So there's a much larger pool of potential sample testimony to go into. And as Richard himself admits, he says that this is a difficult task because it's been contaminated by time. People don't go into this, the free association editing that they normally do. So if it's a story that's been retold again and again and again. Of course, these are also media spots which could have been edited, which is another issue that Richard comes onto. And so he analyses these people. Colonel Charles Holt, Deputy Base Commander. He also, and then the second one is Jim Peniston, who was one of the principal witnesses. The third one is Larry Warren, another principal witness, in fact the first whistleblower, the guy who got this story out. And the fourth one is Peter Robbins, who is Larry's co-author, or former co-author. As you know, if you've been following the gossip and all the other things that need to go into the Shill Tribunal, Peter has changed his mind about Larry, and in fact he's denounced him in the strongest possible terms. He did a complete 180, very suddenly actually, and turned against Larry Warren. I myself was also in the target because Peter did the same to me, basically. And if you're familiar with that, if you read the main Hapanmo blog, or you listen to Hapanmo radio, you'll know I've covered this, because Peter actually accuses me of some pretty horrible things. Peter, I've found, I believe now, is a pretty distasteful person. Peter Robbins is someone I recommend you don't trust, and he has said false and very defamatory things about me, as well as Larry. But that's something I've covered before. Indeed, if you go to I've got a link in the description box to my article about which is my review of Rich Planet TV program 279, and there's links in that to other things that I've said about this matter. So I don't want to fill this particular description box up with links, but there are links in the link in the description box which will take you to more information if you're not familiar with this subject. So the conclusion of Peter Hyatt is, drum roll, all 4 of them were lying. All of them. Not only that, but George Noory, the guy who's interviewing Peniston in the sample, he apparently knows more than he's saying, and he's leading the witness on. So George Noory, it's another name for the list, Richard. Yeah. So all four of them are lying. Now, it doesn't surprise me that Peter Hyatt has detected lies, because the RFI is continually beset by lies. There is a disinformation campaign within the Rendlesham Forest incident that has been ongoing. It's been active and ongoing continuously since the RFI actually happened. So that is no surprise to me. I think where I disagree with Richard is the nature of this disinformation and who's doing it and what it is. Now, I don't want to comment on Holt or on Penniston particularly, or indeed much on Peter Robbins, because I don't know them very well. I know Peter a little bit, but Holt and Penniston I don't know at all. But I think I am qualified to comment on one of the people within that particular video, and that is Larry Warren. The reason is because he's, of course, a close personal friend of mine. If you follow the link in the description box, you'll see the videos. At least I've made several videos with him, including one where we actually do a tour of Rendlesham Forest. Now, I should also point out there is a documentary coming out soon called Capel Green, which I very much recommend, because it's a top professionally produced documentary all about this particular issue, and that so I think you should definitely check that out. It is going to be, I don't want to say too much about it now because I'm going to cover it in the future. There's been delays in its release, but it is coming. It is definitely coming. Also, of course, I've done my own extensive research project into Larry Warren. Again, links in the links and the video and things like that, where what I found out is that I think Peter Hyatt is wrong and Richard is wrong as a result, because I don't believe Larry is lying. It's not just me, it's Gary Hazeltine, who is another principal researcher into this, who's come to the same conclusion, and a lot of the reasons are in my research project and are going to come out in Capel Green. So there's more, of course, and that, of course, is the issue to do with Sasha Christie. The whole Rendlesham Forest incident research community was turned on its head, and I think this may be what inspired Richard to do this particular program that he's done. And it was turned on its head by Sasha Christie and the allegations that she came out with about Larry. And as I have explained many times, and I maintain, this whole issue which Sasha Christie has created is nonsense. It is she has basically created a fake case against Larry, and she's not done it because she's some kind of disinformation agent. I'm sure she's not working for MI5. She wishes to avenge herself because she has had a personal dispute with Larry, and this is her way of getting back at him. But it's a complete fabrication, and indeed I explain why. It is a bogus research project that she's carried out. Now, of course, now I know that Peter Hyatt is wrong. I mean, I don't necessarily know he's wrong about Holt. I don't know he's wrong about Penniston, and indeed even wrong about Peter Robbins. I don't know that he's wrong about Madeleine McCann and Neil Armstrong. In fact, I think he's probably right simply because the other areas of research into the same issues to do with Madeleine McCann's disappearance and the moon landings have also thrown up issues which lead people to believe that there is some deception which happens to match what Peter Hyatt says about those particular people. Yeah, see, Hyatt's conclusion about Larry directly contradicts my own research. Either he is wrong or I'm wrong, and I don't think I'm wrong. I believe Peter Hyatt is wrong in this case. And I'd be interested, of course, to know exactly what the status is of Peter Hyatt's work. There's no doubt he's a very clever chap, and he has a website. You can go and you can hire him. Obviously, he does a lot of work with police and intelligence and things like that. In fact, the forensic psychology element is an important part of that. However, he's not going to be flawless. He's not going to be fail-safe, and I know he's not now. He's going to make mistakes, like we all do. I wonder what the status is of his testimony in court. I mean, can it be admitted as evidence in court? Can Peter Hyatt's word alone be used to convict somebody? And for example, if you see a bank robbers going into a bank, robbing the place, shooting the place up, killing people and running off with the cash, they get in their car and drive off, and there's this old lady walking up the street with her Zimmer, and you pull her over and you give her the Peter Hyatt test, and she fails that test, does that then mean that this passerby, this old lady with the Zimmer frame, committed that bank robbery, and all the other evidence says otherwise? I'm interested. I mean, I was talking with someone on Facebook about this, and apparently there's been no, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but there have been no control studies of Peter Hyatt's work. In other words, he's never been put up against somebody who is truthful. So a control study would be you basically get to analyse someone you know is telling the truth and he doesn't, and if he detects lies, then obviously he's in error. Things like that. So the conclusion was, and Richard talks about this, and Richard comes to his own conclusions, and that is that there was something did happen in Rendlesham Forest that night, something very unusual, and Richard calls it the sensitive thing. As he calls it, the sensitive thing. That's the terminology he used. He thinks that Penniston was involved directly. He was involved in a direct investigation involving the sensitive thing. Colonel Holt didn't. Now, you may think that's strange because Colonel Holt is his commanding officer. He's the deputy base commander. But again, this is a recurring theme when it comes to need to know. It's quite possible that people very low down in the hierarchy of whichever government organisation it is, are involved in something which people higher up are not. And the people involved are working essentially through a separate chain of command. And that seems to be the case here. And it doesn't surprise me, actually. I think this sort of thing does happen quite a lot, based on not just this, but all other people's research as well. Richard thinks it's something to do with radiation. There was radiation involved in this. Now, Colonel Holt was not briefed into this, but he is lying too, as a result of his secrecy oaths, because he's concerned that there may be some kind of public relations disaster due to this. Could it be something connected with nuclear weapons, perhaps? Because, of course, that type of ordnance was stored on the base. Now, you can guess what Richard says about Larry, and it's extremely unoriginal on his part. He says Larry basically is an agent. Yes. Lo and behold, Richard D. Hall thinks somebody's an agent. My God. Yeah. In fact, Richard has this idea of there's some kind of spy ring involving Larry, Colonel Holt, and a few other people. He believes that Larry was there that night, but he was on the periphery. He wasn't directly involved. And of course, this of course echoes the things that people like Sasha Christie have said. Oh, Larry wasn't there. He just stole the story from Bustinza, etc., etc. Now, I think Sasha's wrong there. I explained why. I've explained why before. And of course, Sasha's not just wrong. She's making the whole thing up. But I don't believe Larry stole the story from Bustinza. But it's odd that Peter Hyatt, his views echo that. And I do wonder actually if Hyatt has actually seen the stuff that Sasha has written. I don't know. Peter Robbins was an unwilling accomplice to Larry Warren's lies. That's the conclusion here. That he knows Larry is telling the truth, and he got involved with the writing project, and somehow he just went along with it and doesn't really want to. Now again, that doesn't quite make sense. Gary Heseltine has actually written a very good piece on this, saying, watch, for all those years he worked on something he didn't believe. He went and he actually stood up for Larry, very passionately actually. Peter was a passionate defender of Larry, oddly enough, almost to within a few months of when he did an about-face. There's actually some more information I can't reveal to you right now about that. Hopefully it will come out soon, but there's all kinds of reasons why I think Peter turned against Larry. The public reasons don't make any sense at all. It just sounds like it's just basically he just starts repeating the stuff that Sasha talks about, and I think he must know that Sasha's talking rubbish. He must know that, and this is almost like a kind of excuse. That's why Peter doesn't like me, because I call him out on that. Now, Richard thinks that the sensitive thing, that the fact that there was such an organised response, or lack of or lack of some kind of confusion and stuff like that, meant that the government the government within the command structure knew what the sensitive thing was at Rendlesham. Now, I've often said that there's other explanations for that, possibly the lack of a contingency plan, the lack of people on the ground. It's very often these cover-ups do go wrong. These cover-ups do actually go wrong. I mean, the Roswell incident itself was effectively an unsuccessful UFO cover-up. The whole thing with the weather balloon and everything that's happened since is simply damage control. the Roswell incident cover-up failed. It failed because we're talking about it now. So there's other examples as well. What the idea Richard then proposes is that the whole UFO mythology around Rendlesham Forest was part of the cover-up. Now, this is actually quite a fashionable idea at the moment. It's not unusual, this idea. This idea that basically the UFOs are essentially a modern mythology. Created in whole or in part, they are created by the intelligence agencies to launder their more down-to-earth operations, spy planes and things like that. And so you create this phantasm, this smokescreen of UFOs, so that the other things will be better hidden. So it's a form of disinformation. As I said, that's quite a fashionable idea. It's not very original. It's something that many other people have said, such as Mark Pilkington, who I've covered before. Now, Richard doesn't, I think, appreciate the various problems with that whole notion, which I've talked about. There are many issues associated with this whole idea. If you, it's essentially a magician's trick that could backfire in any number of ways. It's a very risky gambit. If you're going to draw someone's attention towards something with the ultimate objective of deflecting it away, why would you do that if you know that it might not work? Why not just keep quiet about the whole thing? If I'd been running that particular operation to cover up the sensitive thing, and it was not UFOs, what am I going to do? There's two things I can do. I can just say, look, let's just not talk about it and hope no one finds out. Or am I going to go, hey everyone, look over here, there are flying saucers in this wood. It's not a secret aircraft, but there are flying saucers. Come here everyone, come and look at the UFOs, come and look at the flying saucers. It's all here, look. Okay, there's nothing else going on, it's UFOs, you see what I mean? Come on, come over here. This is why Pilkington's thesis and what Richard says cannot be true. It just makes no sense. If you draw someone's attention towards something and you put out a fake story with it, oh, it's aliens, it's little green men, it's bug-eyed monsters from the planet Zog. Okay, you put that out. Sooner or later, someone's going to come along and they're going to work out what's really going on. This is relevant to Bob Lazar as well, because Bob Lazar, of course, his whole idea is that there are aliens at Area 51. Now, Pilkington doesn't mention Lazar. I actually tackled Pilkington on one of the showings of his film, and he refused to discuss Bob Lazar. But the thing is, Bob Lazar is directly relevant to his thesis. Because if he's right, it means Bob Lazar is a disinformation agent. The purpose of Bob Lazar is they put him out there when nobody was really talking about Area 51 in any detail before they put Bob Lazar out there. So they put Bob Lazar out there to prevent people talking about Area 51. Bob Lazar put Area 51 on the map. So even if there are no UFOs at Area 51, whatever else is going on there now is in far greater danger of being exposed. Because the idea that somehow, if they just say it's UFOs, everyone will go and say, look, it's just UFOs, everyone, look at my tinfoil hat, it's all UFOs. I don't believe the government really underestimate the public that much. So this is why I don't go along with this whole idea. Now, one thing though that I think is possible is related to the secret space program. Now, I'm not saying that the UFOs was a cover-up of that, but the UFO story may have accidentally got out there and basically grew legs when, not because the government wanted it to, but what really happened was there was something related to the secret space program. Now, Richard doesn't bring this up. He doesn't actually say in program 279 exactly what he thinks the sensitive thing is, but he does say it in a previous program. He actually does a program. It was a few months earlier, and he brings on a guest who is, you could probably guess who it was. It's Andrew Johnson, isn't it? He brings on Andrew Johnson, and they talk about this, and they talk about this theory, which is not unique. It's not unique. It's an unusual gateway, but it's not unique. It's also the issue of Andrew Pike. Now, if you know Andrew Pike wrote a very big book. It's actually doorstep of a volume. I reviewed it for UFO Truth magazine, all about this whole particular thing, about the idea that what was going on that night was some kind of secret aviation project. They had some kind of craft which had a free energy power plant and anti-gravity propulsion system. Something went wrong, it came down in the woods, and that's what it really was. Richard and Andrew actually bring some interesting evidence to bear in this particular program. For example, they talk about the dart. Now the dart is, Michael McCandlish talks about this, or is it Mark McCandlish? This thing was captured in East Germany in 1989, just before the wall came down. And it's like a triangular wedge-shaped craft with sort of flat panel surfaces, a bit like the stealth fighter, possibly for the real same reason. But it's not an aeroplane. It's powered by 3 anti-gravity generators, like little spheres that fit underneath it. And if you look at some flying triangle sightings, they have these bright lights at the corners, these white lights. And it's possible that some of these flying triangles, not all of them, are in fact anti-gravity aircraft, things like the TR-3B. And the Dart might have been one of them. This was a small single-seater craft. And apparently one of the anti-gravity balls, they're like casters or ball bearings mounted in the bottom of the craft. Apparently this came loose and it bounced all over the place and everyone had to catch it. It sounds quite comical, doesn't it? And it's interesting that Colonel Holt did a plaster cast of this depression in the place where this thing landed, and it turned out to be like a sort of semicircular or ovoid shape. Some people say it's a rabbit scraping. I don't know exactly, but there's no doubt the Dart does look a little bit like the description Penniston and Burroughs give out. Burroughs wasn't featured in this particular film, which is unusual. Now, what's odd is that there's no cockpit, so what Penniston might have seen was an unmanned drone based on the Dart. It's possible, I can't rule it out. I mean, in my view, it's more likely to be extraterrestrial. I mean, I do think that some of the flying triangles are extraterrestrial. I think, for example, the Pentarch incident was extraterrestrial. The 1990s Belgian flap, I'm not sure. I find it unusual to think, it's unusual behaviour for the secret space program to just invade people's airspaces willy-nilly. I mean, I don't understand why that is. I mean, the thesis is that, oh, they're spreading fake UFO stories. But again, as I explained earlier, why? Why would they do that? So this could be some massive double bluff, and aliens really did land at RFI. Indeed, Larry Warren distinctly remembers seeing not only a craft which materialises, but beings, creatures, living beings. And as I said, Larry has passed a polygraph test. Larry's case has been investigated quite thoroughly. I think Larry appears to be the most honest person involved in this. I think he's telling the truth about what he saw. If only Adrian Bustinza would like come out and back him up, you know. I mean, we'd like to hear him go public again. He has done a couple of interviews, but not many. He's gone quiet again. So Richard has formed his opinion of Larry Warren based on Peter Hyatt's testimony alone and his own cogitation and his own kind of looking into things. Now, what I find unusual, and what I think is to Richard's discredit, is that he's not consulted with either of the 2 principal investigators into the Larry Warren case. That is myself and Gary Heseltine. He could easily have approached us. We're not shy people. We're quite happy to talk to people. And the thing about it is, of course, that you could say, well, he doesn't know us. Well, he can't get in touch with us. But he knows us. He doesn't even have to approach us as strangers. He already knows us. He sees us at conferences and things when he's on tour and stuff like that. At any time, he could have approached us and asked us to contribute, and he didn't do that. And it begs the question: why not, Richard? Why didn't you? And of course, he's not obliged to. He's not obliged to do that at all. But if he had done, then it would have been a better program. And unfortunately, program 279 of Rich Planet, Rendlesham UFO 40 Years of Lies, contributes little or nothing. It's a very poor program, and that's a pity. It's a pity for me to say that, because I'm a big Rich Planet fan. I really do like Rich Planet TV very, very much. So Could we make this a test case for the new tribunal once we got it up and running? What we do is we simply, once we set it up, we put the defendant in as, who would be, say, Larry Warren, for example, or one of the others. We put the defendant into the defendant's seat with the defendant's advocate, and then we get the accuser. The accuser could be Sasha Christie, it could be Richard D. Hall, somebody else. And then we have the judge, witnesses, we have the members of the jury, etc. And we carry out a hearing. I mean, I think it'll be a good test case. And once that's done, we then have a verdict which we can then distribute. And I know very well that this is all purely voluntary. I know that there are still large numbers of people who will not accept the verdict of the tribunal, no matter what it is, and no matter who is the defendant. And they're not obliged to. But this is a step in the right direction. This is a way of resolving the deadlock caused by infighting. And as I explained in previous videos, at the moment it's like ordeal by hashtag, isn't it? It's medieval justice. It's evil person over there, evil person over there, get your torches and pitchforks. And it won't do. It won't do for civilized people who say they're interested in building a better world than the one we have now. How can we build a better world when we're going to go back to the days of witch burnings? I mean, there's another example that's recently come up. I mean, you know, Secure Team 10 has been in a lot of trouble lately. They haven't put up new videos, and it turns out that Tyler, the guy who runs it, is in trouble with the law. Now, again, there's all kinds of differing opinions within the truth movement, but this, of course, has led to another truth mob. It's led to another of these situations, another of these infighting situations. And Unirock has just uploaded a 1.5 hour video about this. I've watched about half an hour of it. I find this sort of thing a bit tiresome. I don't know the truth right now, and I haven't watched all the video, but Unirock is a bit of a shillhead. He does. He's the guy who came out with, he did a massive project about QAnon, which I've covered in my QAnon videos, where he said, oh, QAnon's all fake. I mean, I explain why I don't think that's true. But I do, when people focus so much on infighting, as I said in part 1 and 2 of this series, it makes me think less of them. It makes me wonder what they're really in this for. I mean, there are certain people who literally do nothing else. They are literally simply the self-appointed truth policemen of the UFO paranormal conspiracy theory world. And I'm not going to repeat myself by going through these points again, but it's extremely damaging that these people are operating and what they do. It's not helping matters. The purpose of the Shill Tribunal, as I've described in this film and in the last 2 in this series, part 3 and part 4, is an attempt to create a form of healing, an attempt to break through the deadlock and to nullify the negative effects and the toxic influence of these petty little internecine wars, these Facebook like and dislike battles. I think we're old enough and mature enough to deal with this in a civilized manner, and I believe that the Shill Tribunal is a way forward. If you disagree, that's fine. Put in the comments box exactly why you disagree. As I said, these ideas that I've talked about in this particular film are not final. They're not final, they're an idea, they're a plan, they're a contingency, they're a model which we might apply. And once we apply them, if we can apply them successfully, we will become a much, much more functional and healthy community. I'll do another update on this soon, I hope, with your help, because I'd like to know what people think. So, in the meantime, thank you all of you for watching Hapanwo TV. There'll be a comments reply video coming soon, I think, next, or soon. Hospital Port is pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order.